From headquarters, Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center in San Antonio, Texas, this is Inside AFIMSC, a podcast dedicated to bringing you news and information directly from our leaders, experts, and teammates. I'm your host, Ed Shannon. Today, we're visiting with AFIMSC's Budget Director, Lieutenant Col Laurie Lanpher, and Mr. Chris Underwood, Technical Director for Financial Analysis with AFIMSC's Budget Office. They lead a team that manages a $7 billion installation and mission support portfolio. Welcome, Col Lanpher and Mr. Underwood.
Thank you, Ed. We're happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Ed.
When we say the Air Force executed $7 billion in a fiscal year, what does that mean?
So, Ed, the DoD fiscal year runs from 1 October to 30 September every year. And here at IMSC, we spent a little over $7 billion this year on installation and mission support requirements across 77 installations that we have across the world. These requirements include facility recapitalization and sustainment projects, as well as funding needed to run those facilities. It also includes things like dining facilities to feed our airmen, our supply logistics chain, installation security, and air-based ground defense.
So I know it funds an awful lot at every installation around the world, and you faced a lot of challenges in FY19. Would you share what some of those challenges were and how your team adjusted during the year?
Yeah, absolutely. So FY19, we got off to a good start with the signed appropriation on time. And so we went into the year really hopeful that it was going to be a very smooth fiscal year. But quickly, we realized that wasn't going to be the case when Hurricane Michael struck the Florida Gulf Coast and really devastated Tyndall Air Force Base. And really, that was the start of the fiscal year that we weren't expecting. And so after that, we were impacted by earthquakes up in Alaska, J-Bear, as well as flooding at Offutt. And then, we did some additional support of the southern border. And so all those different events obviously forced us to change our plan to make sure that we were able to resource those requirements and cover down on those needs.
Now, centralization of the installation and mission support portfolio moved from the MAJCOMs to AFIMSC in 2016. How has that centralization benefited the Air Force and its installations?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we centralized the program, I think one of the biggest things that we realized is when you looked at this portfolio across the 10 different MAJCOMs, you never realized how broken each of them were. When I say broken, not funded to what the requirement truly was across the Air Force. And so with centralization, we brought all those requirements here. And as we went through our first initial distribution back in 2016, it really gave us an idea of across the Air Force enterprise how far behind we were at getting after some of our sustainment requirements, or even just funding things as simple as utilities. You would think something like turning the lights on would be something that we would plan and program for, but unfortunately that wasn't the case when we have to balance requirements across the entire Air Force enterprise. So that was the biggest thing that we saw. But again, with centralization, we wanted to make sure that one of the things we're trying to get after is covering down and making sure there's standard levels of service across the enterprise. And so that's the second piece that I think is really important to centralize in this portfolio.
So you have a picture of what all of those requirements are across all MAJCOMs. How do you know how to spend the next available dollar? Are there rules or a special process that you follow?
Well, in bringing everyone here to IMSC, we were able to put together a corporate process where the enterprise managers and the budget analysts all get together to determine a prioritization that then gets recommended and approved through a standard corporate group, board, and council structure. So at the end of the year, that also allows us to kind of take a look at all of the unfunded requirements, and we rank those via a weighted score that is made up of the wing commander's priority, as well as a functional area priority, and the installation's ability to execute additional funding. So it allows us to rack and stack and come up with a good priority for making the best of every dollar.
And there are rules to spend a certain percentage of that money by the end of July. Can you
Yes,
explain
sir.
what that is about?
Yes, sir. That is true. DOD is subject to a statutory limitation from Congress that we can't spend more than 20% of our annual operations and maintenance funding, which is 1 year funding, in the last 2 months of the fiscal year. So, of course, it's very important that we comply with that rule. And that actually ends up being kind of the first step going into our fiscal year closeout procedures. And so this year we were able to meet that 80%. Actually, we topped it to 85%, and that is beneficial because we're a very large portfolio, and it actually helps the Air Force meet that limitation as well. So this year we were able to scrub the books at the end of year, and we were actually able to cover all of the installation's number one unfunded requirement, which was a huge win for the Air Force.
And when you get to close out, I think your team approaches that with a really neat innovation, which is to establish a war room. And what is the purpose of the war room, and how does it assist with the closeout operations?
Yeah, absolutely. So the great thing about the war room is really it gives us a single voice. And that's one thing that we're really focused on here within AFIMSC, is making sure that we have a single voice to the customer. And so by bringing the detachment FMs here to San Antonio to interact with our budget analysts that we have here supporting the installations, as well as the PSUs, it gives us that one single voice back out to the customer. The second piece is really when you get a group of 25 or 30 people together, it gives you an opportunity to learn. Each of us come to the table with different experiences, and so when you get all those folks in a room, it's amazing how much they bounce ideas off each other and how much they grow as analysts as well. So really a twofold benefit for the Air Force there with the war room.
I want to add one thing to that. It's amazing the level of camaraderie that comes together with bringing people together at the end of year, because one of our favorite things to do is eat, of course. So in addition to all of the closeout stuff, we get to test people's recipes and order in 4-foot pizzas and do all the fun stuff that's associated with closeout as well.
Very good. And now we've entered FY20 with a continuing resolution authority. Would you share what that means and how that affects your approach to managing funds?
So a continuing resolution happens when we don't have a signed appropriation, right? So bottom line, it means that we are essentially not allowed to do more in our 1 year funding than what we did last year. What we've tried to do here at IMSC is we have such steady obligations throughout the year that we're able to step out at the beginning and say, we got you covered on your annual amounts. It's nothing new. It's something that we do every year. And we just make sure that each installation has enough to get their must-pay requirements straight out of the door in October, and that includes projects that we take care of too, because we handle the project list in a way where we always have some ready to go at the beginning of October, and that gets our obligations going right out the door.
Yeah, ma'am, and I'm glad you bring up projects, because one of the things that under a CR, a lot of people get confused is the fact that there's no new starts under a CR. And so within the O&M appropriation, a lot of times people think that the new start rule applies to us, especially with the facility projects and whatnot. And that's just not the case. We're able to get out the gate and fund those projects that Colonel Lanpher mentioned.
Well, it's an impressive operation, and I appreciate you joining me today for this podcast. And thank you to everybody listening to Inside AFIMSC. Please visit the AFIMSC webpage and Defense Visual Information Distribution System, or DVIDS, for more news and information. And don't forget to join the conversation on AFIMSC's Facebook page. Have a great day.